In May of 2014, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision in Plumhoff versus Rickard. It's essential to understand this decision that we review the facts of this case. Near midnight on July 18, 2004, an officer of the West Memphis, Arkansas Police Department pulled over a motor vehicle that had only one operating headlight. The vehicle was being driven by Donald Rickard. In the passenger seat was Kelly Allen. The officer asked Rickard if he had been drinking. Rickard responded he had not. And because he failed to produce his driver's license upon request and appeared nervous, the officer asked Rickard to step out of the car. But instead, Rickard then sped away. The officer gave chase and was soon joined by 5 other police cruisers. They first attempted to stop the Rickard vehicle using a rolling roadblock, but that was not successful. As they were traveling along, they were described by the district court as swerving through traffic at high speeds, with cars attaining speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. Rickard and the officers passed more than 24 vehicles in the process. Exiting I-40, Rickard made a quick right turn, causing contact between his car and a vehicle driven by Officer Evans. As a result of this contact, Rickard's car spun out into a parking lot and collided with Plumhoff's cruiser. Now in danger of being cornered, Rickard put his car into reverse in an attempt to escape. As he did so, Evans and Plumhoff got out of their cruisers and approached Rickard's car, and Evans, gun in hand, pounded on the passenger side window. At that point, Rickard's car made contact with yet another police cruiser. It was at this point Plumhoff fired 3 shots into Rickard's car. Rickard then reversed in a 180-degree arc and maneuvered onto another street, forcing another officer to step to his right to avoid being hit by the vehicle. As Rickard continued fleeing down that street, 2 other officers fired 12 shots toward Rickard's car, bringing the total number of shots fired during this incident to 15. Rickard then lost control of the car and crashed into a building. Rickard and his passenger Allen both died from some combination of gunshot wounds and injuries suffered in the crash that ended the chase. As a result, a 1983 action was brought by the estate of Mr. Rickard against the officers. The estate claimed that the amount of force was unreasonable, as was the number of shots fired. As you know, the standard under the Fourth Amendment is, of course, one of reasonableness. To determine that, the court looks at the totality of the circumstances. In deciding Plumhoff versus Rickard, the court referred to the often-cited Graham versus Connor, where the court stated, "We analyze this question from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene rather than with the 20/20 vision of hindsight. We thus allow for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving about the amount of force that is necessary in a particular situation." The court then discussed Scott versus Harris. In that case, decided in 2007, the court considered a claim that a police officer violated the Fourth Amendment when he terminated a high-speed car chase by using a technique that placed a fleeing motorist at risk of serious injury or death. The record contained a videotape of the chase, and the court found that the events recorded on the tape justified the officer's conduct. The court noted that from the videotape, it learned that the respondent posed an actual and imminent threat to the lives of any pedestrians who might have been present, to other civilian motorists, and to the officers involved in the chase. Still referring to the video, the court noticed that in Scott versus Harris, the respondent's vehicle raced down narrow 2-lane roads in the dead of night at speeds that are shockingly fast. We see it swerve around more than a dozen other cars, cross the double yellow line, and force cars traveling in both directions to their respective shoulders to avoid being hit. The court noted, "We held that a police officer's attempt to terminate a dangerous high-speed car chase that threatens the lives of innocent bystanders does not violate the Fourth Amendment, even when it places the fleeing motorist at risk of serious injury or death." Returning to the facts in Plumhoff versus Rickard, the court noted, "We see no basis for reaching a different conclusion here." In so doing, the court noted Rickard was obviously pushing down on the accelerator because the car's wheels were spinning, and then Rickard threw the car into reverse in an attempt to escape. The record conclusively disproves the respondent's claim the chase in the present case was already over when petitioners began shooting, and under the circumstances, at the moment when the shots were fired, all that a reasonable police officer could have concluded was that Rickard was intent on resuming his flight, and that, if he was allowed to do so, he would once again pose a deadly threat for others on the road. Rickard's conduct, even after the shots were fired, as noted, he managed to drive away despite the efforts of the police to block his path, underscores this point. The court then noted, as in Scott, the officer's use of force was in fact reasonable under the circumstances. As to the number of shots the officers fired, the court noted at no time did Rickard attempt to abandon his flight. The takeaways from this case. First of all, these cases of use of force are fact-driven from the totality of the circumstances. This was a dangerous, high-speed car chase that threatened the lives of innocent bystanders and did not end with the officers using less lethal methods. Another takeaway from this case is the importance of the dash cam. As noted in the arguments before the court, the justices had reviewed the dash cam footage prior to its decision, just as it had in Scott versus Harris. The dash cam is extremely important in demonstrating the seriousness of the events confronting the officers and helping the court understand why the officers made the decisions they made. Officers should also note that the court was not asked to address a claim made by the estate of the passenger in this case. In fact, the court noted that had such a claim been made, their focus would have shifted as to the risk associated with firing into the motor vehicle as it pertained to an innocent passenger. Consequently, officers need to be aware of the presence of third parties in making such a decision. Finally, officers need to understand that this case does not give a blanket right to fire into a moving vehicle. In fact, it's only in extraordinary situations that a court is going to find that reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. Officers need to be mindful that any use of force must end once the threat ends.